From a global economy perspective, the problem is that the U.S. is an economic island of prosperity in a sea of global uncertainty. And these bullet points basically tell us that the remainder of the globe, much of the globe, you can sort of pick your place on the map, has issues economically in terms of their trade, in terms of their unemployment, in terms of all the things that sort of matter to us in the economics world. Obviously, a lot of this is fueled by economics and tariffs and that sort of thing, and that's why you see trade and political tensions and government and what the government roles are in terms of addressing these issues. But right now, we're strong. The rest of the globe is rich, and we're trying to, whether you agree with current politics or not, some of the wrongs are trying to be righted. And so I expressed where we are in terms of the federal funds rate right now. It's such an interesting thing because interest rates are so low, whether it's long-term takeout loans on your house or it's construction loans or business loans. Money is really, really cheap. And you would think that the Fed rates would be going up, but instead they're going down. The reason they're going down essentially is some political pressure, but it really has to do with this global economic weakness more than it has to do with the domestic market right now. So money is cheap, and it's caused a lot of opportunities for all of us in the marketplace. So what am I advising my clients in this climate right now? And by the way, the reason I'm not walking over there, as Scott did earlier, and back and forth, is because this thing won't work from that end. So I'm stuck on this end here. Maybe I'll give this up and say hi to you a little later. So what we're doing is we're skipping along the top of the business cycle right now. So real estate is expensive. All assets are expensive. And that means that if you own it, you're in good shape. If you're trying to buy it, probably not a very good time. Not a very good time to buy. I always recall at this point in a presentation, somebody asked the old industrialist Bernard Baruch back in the 1920s to what did he owe his investment success? And he said, I buy straw hats in the winter. And when you think about that, that made a lot of sense because he bought when other people weren't. And that's essentially what the great real estate fortunes, the people who make the great real estate fortunes in my sector, think about is they buy when other people aren't buying. Now is not a great time to be buying real estate. Prices are way up. Cap rates, capitalization rates are way down, which means that you're risking the same amount of money for a lesser return. And true to point, the numbers that we used to look at, say even 10, 15, 20 years ago, as being acceptable returns for income property like apartments or commercial office buildings or shopping centers and such, we were looking at post 15% return on investment annualized. Now those same investments are now in the single digits as acceptable from investment firms. And that's really a function of the fact that there's little supply, lots of demand, there's lots of capital out there, whether it's equity capital or debt capital. There's just lots of money out there to buy, and now is not a good time to be buying. If a lot of my clients are looking at 1031 exchanges, for instance, they want to get out of one asset and into another, but they don't want to pay the taxes. That's usually a pretty stupid strategy, is to change assets just because you don't want to pay taxes. Better to pay the taxes, take the profit, put what the remainder is in the bank, wait for the cycle to turn down. So when prices drop, as they inevitably will, Scott said that was it Scott or was it, said he'd been through 4 recessions. Who said that? Yeah, Damien said that. I'm older than Damien. Where are you, Damien? There you are. I'm older than he is. I've been through 5 recessions. In fact, I never tell people how old I am. I just say I'm 5 recessions old, which is actually a very positive comment. It means that I've survived the 5. So essentially what happens is the great investments are made when prices drop. That would be the time to invest. If you're involved in income property in San Diego, for instance, apartments, there's never a bad time to invest. It's just that you would be overpaying today relative to perhaps a subsequent time when the economy does recess. And of course, we have huge political uncertainty right now, which drives me crazy and causes me lots of concern. And we're all sort of, this is that week, this is that week where we're going the next phase of impeachment, and all this crazy stuff is going on. And that political turmoil creates economic turmoil, which defines a lot of my clients' investment decisions. So let's turn to San Diego and take a tour of the economy, first of all. In the green, these are the areas that have grown the most over the roughly 8 or 9 year period. personal care, business, finance, operations, construction, computers, math. That gives you a sense of both where we are growing in San Diego and what the diversity of our economy is. Our economy is both growing by, last year we added 30,000 jobs. That's sort of our average good clip on a decent year. And we add that in a variety of sectors. So it's our diversity and our growth that's combined to make this sort of a regional powerhouse. The problem, one of the problems, and I'm going to sort of bleed this conversation into some of the great issues we have in terms of the economy, in terms of real estate, in terms of land use, and where you all fit in that, is that a lot of our economic growth, a lot of our job growth is being driven literally by people who drive to work every day. People who can't find a house in San Diego because we don't have enough housing or because they can't afford the housing. So they're coming from somewhere out there like Riverside County, they're commuting in, and that's the gray bar. And that's a big danger sign, which we have the potential actually to exacerbate over the next couple of years. Just to pause, I want to tell you what's exciting in terms of, with all of this economic growth, there's a lot of exciting things going on in the region. There's a bunch of downtown projects. My clients, the San Diego Padres, just announced a big project on their Tailgate Park site, which if they're able to pull it all together, we'll have a place for 10,000 new jobs in downtown San Diego, which would be virtually unprecedented over the last 3 decades. There's a ton of what we call TOD projects that are going on in San Diego. What that means is transit-oriented development, where we're trying to connect jobs and housing and retail near where places, near where, for instance, the trolley is or where the freeways are and so forth, to sort of deal with the fact that we're becoming a much more urban society. We have to find new kinds of places to grow and new ways to grow. There's a lot of new community plans, particularly with the city of San Diego, that have come out. The most recent one that's big is Mission Valley, where Mission Valley is going through a huge transformation from a farm to a suburb to a big city. And there's a bunch of projects there, not just the Qualcomm Stadium project, but everything due west, the Town and Country. There's a big sort of church-related project going on. There's a bunch of housing, a bunch of redos. I'm working on Mission Valley Center that someday will not be the same Mission Valley Center shopping center that it is today. It'll be a mixed-use project, probably dominated by residential housing and jobs and some retail. That's the kind of transformation we're seeing a lot, not just in Mission Valley, but around the region. I'm also working on a project that is sort of at this point generically called Grand Central Station, where Spa Wars is right now, where the Navy does their R&D. The vision is to build a central station so that we connect people by transit to the airport and to downtown. And along the way, we build thousands of housing units and office and retail. That's a huge project that may come to be. I mentioned the Prodigies project. There's a bunch of stuff around the region in terms of commercial projects, a lot of office projects. Where we're deficient, however, is in the housing area, which I'm going to get into in summary in a moment. So here's sort of where we start in the housing area. Housing starts are way down. I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. Mortgage rates are down because overall rates are way down. Demand is way up. We have an imbalance of supply and demand. Existing home sales have been pretty steady, up and down for the last couple of years. Prices continue to rise, although the rate of that increase has shown some slippage. And we can't build a lot of housing, even if we were given permission to build it all, because some of the deals that we're working on from a feasibility perspective, from doesn't make money perspective, are upside down because construction costs are up 20% over the last 3 years and revenues are not up at the same level. There is a limited elasticity of pricing. In other words, what people can pay for rent, whether they're in apartments. And that doesn't sort of correspond with the level of costs that have gone up, particularly hard costs of construction, and land costs have gone up as well because land is precious. We have less of it, therefore the price goes up. So here's some sense of where we are in terms of prices right now. I put this here because we think we're expensive in San Diego at a median price of $655,000. But look at the numbers in Silicon Valley. They're double what our prices are up there. So one of our economic opportunities is to attract companies from up there to come down here because they think this area is cheap. And that will remain the case for some years to come, I think. But look at San Jose, look at San Francisco, even Orange County and LA are more expensive, at least along the coast, than San Diego is right now. The median household income of San Diego, however, is substantially lower than all these places. And so the real problem is not the price, it's the gap between the median income and the median housing price. That gap in San Diego, in terms of comparing it to other major metropolitan areas, is the biggest of any of these metropolitan areas. It's that gap. People don't make enough here relative to the price of housing, even though the price of housing isn't the highest along the West Coast by a far stretch. The other thing that I want to point out to all of you is that while San Diego continues to grow at a good clip, roughly north of 20,000 people a year in any given year, and we have grown at that rate for many, many years, the difference now since the turn of the century is that we're mostly growing by natural increase versus net in migration. And this bleeds into the economy point as well, which means that that we're going to grow no matter what, unless we decide to impose birth control in the region, because this is the amount of more people being born than dying, which is attributable to over 60% of our growth in the region. The rest of our growth is attributable to net migration, but as you can see from the previous slide, that's a problem because of housing costs. And you can see when it transitioned just after the turn of the century. And SANDAG, the San Diego Association of Government, which forecasts these things, predicts that this is a trend that is going to continue. And then you can see what happens here is that population growth, which is the blue, continues its steady climb, but housing growth has been basically flat. I worked on almost 10,000 housing units last year, which were approved to go into the unincorporated area of North County, San Diego, and not one house has been built almost a year and a half later because it's tied up in environmental litigation, that sort of thing. So we really are going to have a community conversation, a very serious conversation as to whether or not we're going to accommodate this housing. Because if we don't accommodate this housing, it's going to be a challenge for all of you. And I'm going to show you a slide to demonstrate that challenge in a minute. This is the percentage of housing from new homes. It's way down. This is the change in housing and jobs in San Diego County. You can see that employment growth is high, housing change is lower. And look at this. This is another way that most people can see it very clearly. Housing permits way down, whether it's the city of San Diego or the county. We're just not building, partly because it's complicated to build, partly because we get pushback in the neighborhoods from people that already have their housing, partly because of litigation, partly because of environmentalism, partly because of union pushback, lots of reasons why we're not building enough housing. And this is our housing production level relative to other major metropolitan areas. We're way down. This is something we did a year and a half ago. We took a survey of what keeps employers up at night. And the answer, I may have spoke to this last year as a matter of fact, the answer is that for their employees, they can't find housing. Their employees can't find housing for their employees. It's hard to retain employees. It's hard to grow your jobs unless people are coming from outside of the region to here. That's a big challenge. And it's a challenge because we have all these disconnects. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. The first disconnect is geographic. For people to get to their jobs, they have to, in North County, they have to live in South County, unless you're a real high-level paid person. That's a big problem, causes lots of stress, longer commute time, congested freeways. The other major disconnect is we'll only be able to build apartments. Last year, we only built about 9,000 housing units in the whole county. Almost all of them are apartments, no single-family homes, not even dense single-family homes. That's a problem because that doesn't accommodate families, and that's where the real rub is in our sector right now, is in the demographics. Most people, and a lot of faces I'm looking at right now in the audience, are people that are raising families. It's hard to raise families in apartments. This is not Manhattan. So we have to have that community discussion as to whether or not we're going to allow those 10,000 housing units to be built or other housing units to be built that can accommodate families. Otherwise, it is going to have an impact on your businesses. And, well, that's the same slide. So there's a political moment here, which is that there's a ballot measure that's coming out in March, which you want to vote no on. It's called the SOS Measure. And basically, it will limit development in the unincorporated areas. That portion of San Diego that has all the remaining developable property in San Diego County, it basically limits any kind of housing development from being built unless a vote of the people in the entire county accepts that for any units over 6. So that's something to watch out for, because that's a big pushback. It's going to be a big problem for all of you that are trying to grow your businesses. And so what are the solutions? Well, I mentioned them. Broader community coalitions. We need better leadership. We need to embrace new technology, autonomous vehicles, that sort of thing, to allow people to get to their commutes quicker. And then most of the projects that I'm working on these days are mixed-use projects that are involved in the philosophy of trying to get people to live closer to where they work. And if we achieve all of that, well, let me just put it this way. The reason I put this slide up here is because this is a vast and empty nation. And we're so covetous of our land here in this county that we forget, Stacy mentioned my 9-county tour, that most of this country is empty. This county is a place where people want to live and they should live. And we need to do a better job in accommodating housing to accommodate our economic sustenance for your family and for mine. Thank you very much.